Democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. Abraham Lincoln said that over 150 years ago. Nice words. Words you probably still believe today. But here's a truth no one tells you. You've never chosen a leader in your life. Never. What you did was choose from options that were carefully selected for you. It's like a casino. The house always wins, no matter what number you bet on. Think about the last politician you chose. Now imagine that person in a closed room, making decisions that affect millions of lives. What kind of human being can sleep peacefully, knowing that their words can destroy economies, start wars, condemn generations to poverty? The answer is simple: psychopaths. It's no coincidence that the same traits that make someone a serial killer, lack of empathy, calculated manipulation, thirst for control, are exactly the traits that lead someone to political power. The only difference is the scale of destruction. You grew up believing that the best rise to the top, that competence, kindness, and wisdom are rewarded. But look around you. Do you really believe that the people in charge are the most capable or the most cruel? 2,400 years ago, Plato had already discovered this disturbing truth in the allegory of the cave. He knew that those who control the shadows on the wall are not the most enlightened. They are the ones who know best how to manipulate the darkness. And you, chained, confuse these shadows with reality. Today, we're going to descend into the basement of this democratic illusion. We're going to see how the system was designed, from the beginning, to ensure that only predators come to power. And how you've been conditioned not only to accept this, but to defend it as freedom. Because the darkest truth is not that the system is broken. It's that it works exactly as it was designed to work. But first, you need to understand the size of the cage you live in. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and discover that every election in your life has been a sham. That the candidates were actors, the debates were scripted, and the differences between them were just political marketing. How would you feel? Now get ready for something worse. This isn't imagination. This is exactly how it works. When Richard Nixon came to power, it wasn't despite his paranoia and authoritarian tendencies. It was because of them. Nixon didn't cheat the system. The system chose him. Because a competent psychopath is the perfect candidate to keep the machine running. Think about it. What kind of normal person would wake up one day and think, I should control the lives of 300 million people? That's not a normal ambition. It's a pathological ambition. And we don't just tolerate it, we celebrate it. Research from the University of California revealed something shocking. Individuals with narcissistic traits are 35% more likely to be chosen as leaders in experimental groups. Not because they are better leaders, but because they know how to perform leadership better than anyone else. It's like a predator that has learned to perfectly imitate a lamb. You can't tell the difference until it's too late. But here's where it gets really sinister. You've been conditioned since childhood to look for exactly these traits in a leader. Unshakable confidence? Admirable. Ability to make quick decisions without hesitation? Necessary. Charisma that mesmerizes crowds? Inspiring. These are all classic symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago when he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you are." He wasn't giving advice on how to be a good leader. He was diagnosing a terminal illness in human nature. Our inability to distinguish between appearance and reality when power is at stake. But here's what Machiavelli didn't say explicitly, but what any observant person can see. This flaw isn't a bug. It's the core design of the system. Think of Adam Neumann, former CEO of WeWork. He convinced some of the world's smartest investors to value his office-sharing company at $47 billion. How? Through pure psychological manipulation. Neumann sold a grandiose vision of raising global consciousness while his company bled money every month. He would show up to meetings barefoot, talk about spiritual energy, and convince billionaires that renting desks was a cosmic mission. And it worked. For years. When the bubble burst and the company lost 80% of its value in a matter of weeks, everyone pretended to be surprised. Expert analysts wondered how they hadn't seen the signs. But no one should have been surprised. The system is designed to reward exactly this type of charismatic predator. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The system doesn't want competent leaders. It wants controllable leaders. And there's nothing more controllable than a narcissist addicted to power and external validation. A true leader would question orders from above. A narcissist just wants to be on stage and applauded. A real leader would protect the people from corporate interests. A psychopath would sell his own mother for the next job. You grew up believing that you live in a democracy. But democracy presupposes real choice between genuinely different alternatives. When all options lead to the same place, more concentrated power, more control over your life, more wealth flowing upward, that's not democracy. It's an oligarchy disguised as democratic theater. And you are not the sovereign voter you were taught to believe you are. You are the paying audience in this macabre play, applauding as the actors on stage decide how much of your money they will steal and how many of your freedoms they will eliminate. Watch any recent political debate. Notice how no candidate ever questions the fundamental structures of power. They argue about details, how much to spend, where to spend it, how to spend it. But they never question why the system works to benefit the same groups over and over again. It's like watching wrestlers arguing about the color of the ropes in the ring while the audience pays to see a fight that's already been decided behind the scenes. Every election, you choose between different masks of the same monster. And with every victory, that monster grows a little bigger, while your real freedom shrinks in equal proportion. You feel like you're participating in democracy when in fact you're just validating your own slavery. But why can't you see it? Why do you keep participating in a game where you always lose? Why does your own brain sabotage you when you try to question these structures? The answer lies in the most sophisticated engineering ever created by mankind. The architecture of mind control that has shaped every thought you have about power, authority, and leadership. Is this content making you reflect and sparking new ways of thinking? If so, click the super thanks button just below the video. It's a way to say thank you and help me bring more content like this to those who need to reflect on life. This architecture began to be built thousands of years ago, but it was perfected in the 20th century with a surgical precision that would make any engineer jealous. It was no accident that Edward Bernays, Freud's nephew, created what we now call public relations. Bernays understood something fundamental about the human psyche. You don't make rational decisions. You make emotional decisions, and then invent logical reasons to justify them. In 1928, he wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." He wasn't theorizing, he was confessing. Bernays proved he could make anything seem desirable to the masses. He convinced American women to smoke cigarettes by associating the act with torches of liberty. He turned bacon into an essential breakfast food by hiring doctors to proclaim that substantial meals were healthier. If he could sell cancer as freedom and fat as health, imagine what his successors can do with political candidates. Every election campaign today is a laboratory for psychological manipulation. You think you're choosing based on public policy, but you're being seduced by emotional triggers that have been tested in focus groups until they find the exact frequency that bypasses your rational defenses. Watch how it works. A narcissistic candidate doesn't need to have real solutions. He just needs to project the illusion that he's in control. And you, unconsciously, prefer the illusion of security to the reality of uncertainty. Stanford researchers found that leaders who communicate in simpler language receive 23% more votes and 16% higher salaries. Not because they are more competent, but because false simplicity calms your existential anxiety better than honest complexity. That's why politicians talk as if they were talking to 8-year-olds. It's no coincidence. It's strategy. But here's where the engineering becomes diabolical. The system doesn't just select psychopaths. It trains them to be more efficient versions of themselves. Think of any elite business school, any corporate leadership course, any political training program. What do they teach? How to be more assertive, how to influence people, how to sell your vision, how to manage perceptions. In other words, how to be a more sophisticated psychopath. They don't call it that, of course. They use terms like emotional intelligence and transformational leadership. But look at the behaviors that are rewarded. Emotional manipulation, creating dependency, control through charisma, the ability to lie convincingly called communication management. A Harvard Business School study followed 952 executives for 10 years. Those who demonstrated the most leadership traits, excessive confidence, manipulative tendencies, lack of empathy, received promotions 40% faster than their technically superior colleagues. The system is not failing to identify psychopaths. It is working perfectly to promote them, and there is a strategic reason for this. Psychopaths are perfect tools of control because they do not question orders from above, as long as their privileges are maintained. They feel no guilt in implementing policies that destroy lives. For them, human suffering is just a statistic. An empathetic person would hesitate before signing a law that evicts families. A psychopath would simply calculate the political return on the decision. Look at any crisis of the past 50 years. Financial crises, unnecessary wars, environmental disasters that could have been prevented. In each case, you will find the same pattern. Leaders who prioritized personal gain over collective well-being, who lied to the masses while protecting the interests of a microscopic elite. It wasn't incompetence. It was the perfect functionality of the operating system. Because here is the truth that destroys the democratic illusion forever. You were not created to be a citizen. You were created to be a consumer and a worker. Your political participation is just an escape valve that makes you feel like you have some control, while all the real decisions are made in rooms you will never enter. And most disturbing of all, you defend this system. You attack anyone who questions its legitimacy. You have been programmed to protect your own cage. But how exactly does this programming work? How have your own instincts been turned against you? Your mind was hacked before you even learned to speak. Not by aliens or secret conspiracies, but by something much more efficient: targeted evolution. For millions of years, humans who questioned authority died earlier. Those who blindly obeyed alpha leaders survived and reproduced. The result? You carry in your DNA an ancestral programming to submit to signs of dominance. When a candidate steps onto the stage with an upright posture, a deep voice, and expansive gestures, something primitive in your brain whispers, "This person can protect me from predators." You don't even realize that the biggest predator is right in front of you. Stanley Milgram proved this in the 1960s with his experiments on obedience. Ordinary people administered potentially lethal electric shocks to strangers simply because a white-coated authority figure told them to. 2/3 of the participants went through with it, even though they heard screams of pain. Milgram wasn't testing sadism. He was mapping the operating system of human submission. And here's the darkest detail. Who resisted the experimenters' commands? The individuals who questioned authority, who thought independently, who prioritized compassion over obedience. Exactly the kind of people who would never come to power in our system. Because the system doesn't just reward psychopaths, it systematically punishes empaths. With every difficult decision, the empathetic leader hesitates, considers consequences, seeks consensus. Meanwhile, the psychopath acts, takes credit for successes, and blames others for failures. Guess who gets promoted? Researchers at the University of Toronto found that individuals with high empathy are 60% less likely to be selected for executive positions, even when their technical skills are superior. The official reason? Lack of assertiveness and decisiveness. The real reason? Empaths are terrible at implementing policies that enrich the few at the expense of the many. Imagine trying to convince a genuine empath to cut social benefits to fund tax breaks for billionaires. They would physically feel the pain of those affected. A psychopath would simply see numbers on a spreadsheet. That's why the system has developed sophisticated mechanisms to identify and neutralize empaths before they get close to real power. First mechanism: complexity overload. The more complicated the system, the harder it is for people with a conscience to navigate it without compromising their values. Psychopaths don't have this problem. For them, ethics is just another tactical obstacle. Second mechanism: the demand for pragmatism. Every time an empath questions an unfair policy, they are labeled idealistic or naive. The system teaches that having principles is weakness, that morality is a luxury that real leaders cannot afford. Third mechanism: social isolation. Positions of power require decisions that destroy genuine relationships. You have to lie to the press, betray allies, sacrifice subordinates. Empaths literally cannot sustain this psychologically. Psychopaths thrive in this environment. It is their natural habitat. But the most effective control mechanism is not applied to leaders. It is applied to you. You have been conditioned to interpret your virtues as flaws. Your ability to question is labeled negativity. Your need for transparency becomes naivety. Your resistance to manipulation becomes stubbornness. Watch how this works in practice. When you question a political decision, you are called a conspiracy theorist, even when your suspicions prove correct years later. When you demand accountability, you are accused of not understanding how politics works. When you refuse to accept obvious lies, you are told you are being radical. The system has turned your natural defenses against manipulation into social defects that you must overcome to be mature. It's genius, really. Instead of breaking your resistance through force, they've convinced you to break your own resistance through social shame. And it works because you still believe you're part of the system, that you have a voice, that your choices matter. But what if you discovered that even that belief is just another tool of control? That your sense of participation is the strongest chain holding you down? Wake up, work, pay bills, sleep, and repeat it all over again the next day. Life goes by like this, and one day you realize that time has slipped away. Dreams were postponed. Opportunities went unnoticed. This happens because no one ever taught you how to see the game of life the right way. But there is another path. If you want to reach the next level, you need to access new knowledge. And that's exactly what you'll find in the White Rabbit Codes. This book will open your eyes to what is really happening. You'll understand why you keep getting stuck in the same cycles, learn how to escape autopilot, and start seeing the opportunities that were always there. And finally, you'll make decisions that truly lead to the life you've always wanted. If you feel ready for this change, the link is in the pinned comment. You'll be surprised at how simple it can be to increase your prosperity. Success is a decision. The choice is yours. That sense of participation is the most sophisticated illusion ever created. You feel free because you can choose from pre-approved options, like a prisoner who can choose between cells but never questions why he is in prison. But here's a truth that can shatter that mental matrix forever. Genuinely free systems have existed, and they worked. For 300 years, the Republic of Venice operated without a supreme leader. Power was distributed through multiple institutions that checked each other. Leaders served for short terms and were constantly audited. The result? 300 years of prosperity and stability at a time when the rest of Europe was in constant chaos. The Iroquois developed a confederative system where important decisions required consensus from multiple tribes. Leaders were chosen by matriarchs based on wisdom and service to the community, not charisma or aggression. This system lasted over 500 years and influenced the American Constitution itself, before being destroyed by the system that supposedly inspired it. Botswana, under Seretse Khama, proved that humble leadership can transform nations. Khama ruled without cultivating a personality cult, established strong institutions instead of concentrating power, and voluntarily respected constitutional limits. The result, Botswana went from one of the poorest countries to one of the most stable in Africa. These examples are not utopias. They are historical proof that the alternative to rule by psychopaths is not chaos. It is real civilization. The fundamental difference? These systems were designed on the assumption that power corrupts, so they created structures to prevent any individual from accumulating enough power to become a systemic predator. Our current system does the opposite. It concentrates maximum power in a single person, and then pretends to be surprised when that person behaves like a dictator. But here's what the architects of control have discovered. They don't need to rule through force when they can rule through psychological dependence. They've convinced you that you need leaders, that without someone in charge, society would collapse. It's the most profitable lie ever sold to humanity. Look at your own life. Where are you happiest and most productive? When someone is micromanaging your every decision, or when you have the autonomy to solve problems using your own intelligence? The answer is obvious. So why accept the opposite on a social scale? Because you've been convinced that other humans are fundamentally different from you, that they need constant supervision while you are responsible, that they would make terrible decisions if left free while you would make wise decisions. This artificial division between responsible citizens like you and irresponsible masses who need to be governed is the basis of all tyranny. And you buy into this narrative because it makes you feel superior while keeping you submissive. The liberating truth is simple. You don't need shepherds. You never have. Every real solution to complex human problems comes from the bottom up, from ordinary people cooperating voluntarily. Free markets solve scarcity better than central planning. Local communities know their needs better than distant bureaucrats. Individuals make wiser choices about their own lives than politicians do about the lives of millions. What you need is not better leaders. It is the courage to stop looking for leaders. Every time you vote, you are validating the premise that other humans have the right to control your life. Every time you accept an authority making choices for you, you are feeding the system that keeps you infantilized. The real revolution doesn't happen at the ballot box. It happens when you decide that you don't need permission to live your life. You don't need representatives to have a voice. You don't need rulers to have order. It happens when you realize that the difference between freedom and slavery isn't who rules, but recognizing that no one should rule. Plato knew this when he wrote about the philosopher king. He wasn't looking for the perfect leader. He was showing that any system based on permanent leadership is fundamentally corrupt. The true philosopher rejects power because he understands that to have it is to lose it. You've spent your life believing that the choice was between good and bad leaders. But the real choice has always been between leadership and freedom. And freedom is not something that others can give you or take away from you. It is something you recognize you have always had, but have been persuaded to give up in exchange for the illusion of security. The system does not need to be fixed. It needs to be transcended. And that begins the moment you stop looking for saviors and recognize that the only person who can set you free is yourself. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.